through the middle. A little bit open here, Cameron all on his own, and then kick towards the top of the square. Here's a start, the big fella, first game for the Lions. I speak of Brandon Ryan, it's the absolute dream start. Now Morris finds a bit of space, the young man, round the corner.
Bailey had a run, had a second, he electrified us in the grand final. Not quite as good, but pretty close. Beautiful goal from Zach Bailey. Bailey this time, that's better. That might get them going.
Welcome back to the Brisbane Lions Fancast with JB and Patrick. All thanks to Hawthorn Brewery Tours and Crisp Communications. Big shout out to those guys who have been with us throughout the 2024 season. A season that a lot of Lions fans are saying you could probably officially put the line through now as we head to the bye. 4.5 wins, 6 losses, another loss coming to the hands of the Hawks, where that hoodoo continues. We haven't beaten them since 2019, and yesterday was just another case of them being way too good for us and us being our own worst enemies. Inaccuracy, drop-offs in effort, ill-discipline from certain players. Put it down to whatever you like. The Hawks got the chockies, and we are left to lick our wounds heading into the bye with the red-hot Bulldogs waiting for us on the other side. Patrick, it's been some sort of season so far. Plenty of ups and downs, more downs than we would have liked, that's for sure. What are your thoughts on how things went down yesterday?
Well, in a larger sense, let's be honest here. Like, I don't think there would have been much thought of looking forward to a bye twice in a season. But here we are. So there's that metric to go off, because I traditionally have not really enjoyed the bye. I mean, I know it's served its purpose at certain times, but I'm always just like, the bye? We're not in under 10s here. Come on, guys. Here we are with me in 2024 going, thank goodness for the bye.
Yeah, the bye historically has not been our friend.
Well, entering or exiting, really.
Yep.
At various stages, sometimes both. Last year, both.
And
so
maybe for 2024, both as well. So you really
this year, both earlier on.
Yep.
So I don't know. The bye, how good.
You'd really hope that we take this week to, I don't know, I feel like there needs to be some sort of serious circuit breaker. Fagan can keep bloody referring to Carlton's 2023 season and how well they went. One of the things they did during their bye was go down to Ed Kerno's farm and have a bit of a truth session. So maybe it's time for these boys to sit together, turn off their phones, and just have a good old powwow and hey, what the fuck's going wrong with this team? Is this, what you want to be known for? Is this the team you want to be? Like, I understand that we made a grand final last year and you're all eager to get back and not put in the hard work to get there, but you have to. So what is it that you want to do this year? What do you want to achieve? And what do we need to do to get it done? Because, there is just something so intangibly wrong with everything going down. You can point to injuries. You can point to, this off-season trip. There's maybe more and more linked to it because some of the players that are underperforming, they're the same names that have been linked to that off-season trip. So maybe there's more to it than we like to admit. But there's something seriously wrong with the Brisbane Lions 2024 team. It is not the team we were used to seeing and not the team we expected to see this year. So this is where we're at. What do you reckon? Did the bye, is it just a time to, take some time away from the club, or is it a time to say, hey, pull your fingers out, let's try and get competitive here?
I definitely don't think it's time to take time away from the club. It's time to spend more time in the club. And that's something that's cropped up in my rhetoric over the past, I want to say, month, is the idea of how much time are the players spending in the club? And I think when, my mum's down from Brisbane and she follows a lot of social media and relationshipism stuff of the players and stuff, and has done so over a few years and stuff. It's not really my cup of tea, but talking to her about it, there's been elements as well of in the past, guys like Mitch Robbo and his partner and stuff kind of cultivating quite a heavy community element of the team, particularly with the young players And it almost seems like, obviously with him gone and then with them separating, there seems to be almost like a breakdown where if they're not spending as much time in the club, they're also not spending that much time together in a social sense. And there's obviously been a breakdown with what happened in the off season, that it's almost like they're not together. There's a distinct lack of togetherness with the players. And it almost seems like the older players aren't trusting the older players, and then they're also not trusting the younger players. And it just, there's so many elements of breakdown. So in terms of like over the bye, I mean, I'd be looking at almost a level of restructuring to try and get the players in with one another more often, because there's disconnect. And there's one thing to be said for things like the skill level and stuff like that. That's another thing entirely. I haven't seen us fumble or miss disposals, which I think is an indication that they're not training enough. But go from there.
Inaccuracy, another big one for 2024. That is, it plagued us around sort of 2020, 2021, but it's back for 2024, especially with a few players. And just our top 3 goal scorers from last year just look a shadow of themselves this year. A lot of people are pointing to the method in which we're entering inside 50, and how basically every other team has figured that out now, and we're easy to defend, and we're really, really predictable in the way we move the ball forward, and everyone else has cottoned on to that, and now we need to shift and move to that infamous plan B that Fags seemingly doesn't have. So yeah, there is a fair bit going on. We'll try and dissect as much of it as we can. We've got a lot of questions to try and get through a little bit later on in the show as well. But, we made just 2 changes for the team this week. It was the changes that we sort of forecast last week. Brandon Ryan came in for Eric Hipwood. Bales came in at the expense of Shadow Brain, who missed out on playing 2s as well. So, fairly predictable changes in that respect. It'll be interesting to get, I guess, inside the minds of the people that wanted Hipwood dropped after this week, because we saw what our team looks like without him. I have seen a few little bits and pieces across social media of people going, yeah, we needed Hipwood. I wonder where the Hipwood droppers are now. Some people literally apologising, going, oh wow, I didn't realise just how much he did. So you would imagine he comes straight back in for Brandon Ryan, who, it's his first game. I'm not going to be too harsh on him, but he looked very, very far off the pace on the weekend. And that inexperienced forward line with Logan Morris, Brandon Ryan, Joe Danaher, and sometimes Oscar McInerney down there as well, just getting in each other's way and not knowing each other's leading patterns and what their role should be. So there was definitely a lot more disconnect in that forward line than we're used to. And in a year where there's already a very, very tangible lack of connection in that forward line, that just added to it all.
Yeah, I think one thing, after about 4 minutes, we're probably all thinking, wow, look at this. Brandon Ryan, the man for our daughters, as it was, not quite the case. I think one of the biggest kind of, 1 tackle, 2 disposals, not much. One of the things for me, though, is time on ground. He was only on the ground for half the game, and I know he was subbed off. But with him not being on the field as much, probably, leads to other players picking up more game time and being more tired. Whereas you could probably imagine Hipwood tends to sit in that sort of, 75 to 80% game time realm. So there's a bit of that. But, I mean, the changes you mentioned before, they're like, they were predictable in the sense that they were the least predictable changes, I suppose. Because I think a lot of us were kind of, there was two trains of thought. You're going, will it be Darcy Fort or will it be Brandon Ryan? That sort of thing. So, yeah, just give me 1 second. I need to. Sorry, Mum's just on the phone in the other room and I can hear her. I'm just wondering if it's bleeding through.
No, I kind of hear it.
Okay, we'll just.
Well, we will get to the 2s a little bit later. But Darcy Fort played really, really well. I was really impressed with how he played. So might not be long before he's back in the team, depending on whatever happens, injury-wise over the next couple of weeks or whatnot. But yeah, I mean, hindsight, as they say, is 2020. Probably would have preferred Darcy Ford in the team to Brendan Ryan, but it is what it is. Like, you're never going to know until you make that call.
Yeah, I'm not going to say that it was a poor choice or anything like that. I know that there were people that were sort of wondering why we persisted with 3 talls, and it's sort of like, well, look at what Sicily did when we were playing them. Imagine what he would have done had we been not. And I think, we touched on it, or we might have touched on the fact of having Brandon Ryan and Logan Morris being 2 pretty inexperienced forwards, and then with Danaher pitching in with the ruck. But like, just the idea of having those guys, Logan Morris take up much more, structural implicity, I suppose. He was really good, in terms of he's a proper baller. So Logan Morris isn't really doing himself any disservice at the moment. So that's one of the bright spots, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think there was definitely elements in that game where, the meme where it's like, Mum, can we have this? And it's like, we've got it at home, it's this.
Yep.
Mum, can we have kicking out of the back half? And it's Sicily, and we've got Dane Zorko. That's my thoughts on that one. Zorko had a mare in that first quarter, and it's been coming. I know that he's probably leading our BNF, but, that's circumstantial. And I think that the article that I wrote on Back Way When, the only one, we should probably, release it from its classified status and, just release it to the press. But yeah, he wasn't good.
No, it was a we've got the Zorko that we know, and the one that has been largely producing in 2024, and then we've got the other Zorko that we know, and that is the piece of shit Zorko, and we got that yesterday. He got sucked in by Jack Ginnivan basically all game, was responsible for at least 3 goals. But you're going to get that. That is part of Dane Zorko. It's not the part that we like, but it's the part that you get every now and then, and hopefully he'll get a rap over the knuckles. He'll know as much as anyone that he's capable of that, and that he can't produce that if he wants to be a contributing member of this team. So I've got faith that we won't see that again for a while, or we might. Who knows? That is the nature of Dane Zorko. He's a piece of shit, but he's our piece of shit, and we've got to stand by him through all that sort of stuff. Every team needs a piece of shit. This one just happens to be ours. So, look, there were definitely periods of that match where we played quite good footy. That sort of 10-15 minute period in the second quarter where we clawed the margin back. Our pressure was 240 plus that they displayed on the broadcast. We just could not put it on the scoreboard. Inaccuracy again. Charlie Cameron is just woefully out of sorts, especially with his set shots. He kicked one, I'm going to say set shot, but it was an around the corner snap. So does that count? I don't know. But the rest of his snapshots, anytime he went for the drop punt, he faded one left, faded one right. He faded one that barely made the distance and was headed for out of bounds on the full as well. So really quite disappointing from him. Logan Morris, as you said, though, fantastic up forward.
His movement through traffic kind of at ground level was just like, all right, dude.
Yeah.
Settle it down. Go on, mate.
Kicked a nice set shot from a decentish angle as well. Went the drop punt, went straight through.
Kyle Lohman was also good too,
He certainly was.
A bit quieter from Archie, and I think in a season where Cam Rayner's been poor, that was as bad as it gets for Cam Rayner.
Yes, and I did say we've got a fair amount of questions coming. Fair to say Cameron Rayner is at the centre of a lot of them. Now that the heat is off Eric Hipwood for a week, everyone's turned their attention to Cam Rayner, so we will have a good chat about Cam a little bit later on in the show as well, and just decide and figure out where exactly he is at the moment. Really annoying to see Jack Gunston play a good game of footy. I like Jack Gunston. I've always liked Jack Gunston up until he came and played for Brisbane. I think he's a really good footballer, like a traditional footballer, a smart footballer. It didn't work for him up here, whether it was the structure, the system, or just simply where his head was at. It just did not work up here. But it was annoying to see him play really well against us, and especially those 2 red time goals in the last 20 seconds of the first half, and then again before the 3/4 time siren, just putting some goals in. He ended up with 4. Played a good game. Will end up in the votes, I would imagine. Really annoying, very reminiscent, and someone put this on Twitter. Sorry, I can't remember who it was, but it was very reminiscent of when Bradshaw tore us a new one the first time we played him at Sydney, albeit much different circumstances and players, but yeah, just a real kick in the teeth.
Was that where Bradshaw nailed that torpedo?
Yes.
I love a torpedo. Yeah, I mean, the cynic in me is kind of like, all right, well, why is it that when you played with James Sicily for ever, you couldn't nullify anything about him, but you come in, play half a season with us, and you just pretty much stitch Harris Andrew up the whole game? Come on, Jack.
I thought Harris still played pretty well.
Yeah, he was good, but we don't see him get muscled out of impacting contests that often.
Yeah.
And, it was just a bit to see James Sicily absolutely destroy us last year, and Jack Gunston was, put to him to do something. And obviously Mitchell's like, hey, you know what you didn't do to Sicily last year? Well, make sure you do that, but to Harris.
Yeah.
And, Harris is never really going to have a bad game. He's too good to have a bad game, basically. But yeah, it was frustrating. We didn't end up getting a psychic sponsorship, did we?
No.
I have a grand Jack Gunston theory for later on in the episode.
Let's look forward to it.
Hold our breath for that. It's going to be fucking Oscar winning. So yeah, Jack Gunston, what an asshole.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. I mean, I say it in jest. I still do like Jack Gunston, and hope he's got 250 games coming up for him very shortly, and he's going to deserve that. But yeah, real pisser.
Well, I think there was a level of apathy between him and the other teams in terms of no one really. It was almost like everyone agreed to forget that he played for the Lions.
Yeah,
for one day only, and we wish he hadn't.
The midfield was taught a new one as well on the weekend. Warple Newcomb wasn't that influential. He had bits and pieces, but Will Day, those two, Will Day and Warple especially, had great games, and Lloyd Meek in the ruck. I thought Oscar had a pretty good game, but Lloyd Meek held his own.
Was not Meek. He was not Meek.
No, it was. You thought for a second when he went down with that, whatever it was, an ankle or a knee or something, you thought, okay, this could be our chance to, albeit through opened opportunity via injury, this is our chance for Oscar to get a little bit of dominance here and maybe get our game going. He ended up coming back. So, but I thought that was generally a good tussle across the game. I thought Oscar played pretty well, but I think Lloyd probably walked away with the win, by and large in the end.
Yeah, I mean, we had some pretty good moments of some actually really good hit outs to certain, the golf of Zach Bailey and a couple of kind of Crackers Keating moments, which were good, and I'd like to see almost more of. We were sort of getting first hands on the ball, and then it was so coagulated, and they were just getting out the front of stoppage, and there were insane times where you see Neil get the ball and hit it backwards. Neil was playing rugby a lot in at least the first half. He was going back often, and sort of okay, cool, don't go back to Warple out the front of the stoppage. Don't do that, just go forward.
Yeah,
if we've learned anything from the way that Collingwood, or even back to the Bulldogs and Richmond, carry the ball forward, ground ball forward, and work for it there. But Neil lifted in the third quarter, and I mean, the eye test is a strange one sometimes, because statistically Neil was killing it, but I don't know. What were your thoughts?
I thought for the second week in a row, his kicking was really good. I thought he hit his targets with his foot. He's definitely had his moments. I know the one you're talking about. And it made Hawthorn look so good because after that all happened, the commentators were talking about, oh, that's the perfect centre square stoppage, Ruckman down to your midfielder who's coming straight out of the front of the stoppage and delivered it straight to Marby or Chol on the chest. But we got, as you said, we got first hands to the ball, and Neil just chunked it and went straight to Warple, and it just opened up for them. We were caught out of position, and it all just sort of went from there. I thought a bit of his explosiveness was actually back this week as well for Chucky.
The one early on through the pack was pretty impressive.
There was a few little instances around the ground as well where he sort of burst out of stoppage a little bit more than we're used to seeing so far. And like I said, his kicking is been quite good. But and I thought he was probably our best on across the day. There was a few others that had decent games. There was definitely a few that had poor games, but I thought by and large, Neil was all right. But
his second half, because I recall looking, and his meters gained in the first half was about 150, and he ended with 640. So he gained a lot of meters, but I think also there was some pretty yucky turnovers.
Yeah,
which is never good because you don't want the ball coming back. But yeah, so he was good in the third and fourth quarter for sure. And he there were some flashes, but it's just there seemed to be a lot of running up and getting stuck and going backwards and then kicking. There was one, I think it might even have gone to Charlie Cameron for his set shot goal that sort of went back to Noah Answorth, and it's sort of like it's a strange when you're running towards goal and you've got two men out the back. What are you doing? Like, why are you going back to go forward? Like, I would understand it if it was a, fully stocked backline, everyone was marked and you were trying to pick a target, but there were guys literally out the back. And I just think there's definitely some moments like Hugh McCluggage didn't hand off to Danaher running through in 50, and just, there's just, as we sort of talked about, a lack of coherency, consistency, togetherness, trust.
Yeah,
all of them, really, all of them. Probably saw the best kick of Jared Berry's career.
Yeah,
that dart.
Yeah, he had a few good moments, and whether that was meant to go to Kai Lohmann, I don't know, but it hit him straight on the chest, and it just cleared the Hawthorn defender by a couple of centimeters. It looked fantastic, whether he intended it or not.
I would say there was no one else there, and I know we've seen him do some weird stuff. If we're going to say Sicily meant the one that went just over Jared Berry's head, which I think is the best kick I've seen this year.
He had a few.
From deep, but that particular one from deep 50, to get it over 195 centimetre, Jared Berry's outstretched hand to drop 1 metre behind him. Fantastic. Like, unbelievable.
Yeah. He had another great game, and it was really annoying, because he pulled our pants down last year, that we let it happen again, which is really frustrating. The other thing was the effort, which was there and then wasn't there, just not consistent. We had that period I spoke about before. It was right up, the pressure was right up that's when we were playing our best footy, and then it almost seemed like, oh yeah, that's enough. We can take the foot off the gas a little bit here and just try and coast and stay within. But no, we let them put on, 4-goal spells consistently. It was just not a real fun game. You said it was very reminiscent of the Bulldogs game last year.
Yeah, it sort of felt at that game that we sort of like, if we had just played a small amount better, we would have won in that game, and we probably would. It's a weird thing to look at it and you go, there's 3 goals in red time, and the margin's 25 points, and I understand probably the Bruce one at the end probably only happens because we're pushing men forward, but like, I remember there was 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and we're sitting there, we'd put on 3 goals in a row, and I'm like, if we can keep them from scoring in the last 4 minutes, it doesn't matter if we score, we're 8 points, we'll win. And they scored, and I was just like, ugh. They can't even lock out against Hawthorn for 4 minutes. Like, for all of the like practicing modes and whatever shit and putting men behind the ball and this sort of stuff, like, just accountability across the field just wasn't there. And then, as you said, they put on 3 more goals. They They kicked 5 goals. 5 goals in the last quarter. They kicked none last week. So 5 goals in the last quarter. Jeez. So that's a shit indictment, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. Is like surely they would have spoken across the week about what happened to Hawthorn last week against Port Adelaide, how they were not going to let that happen again, and how they were going to come out hungry. They were going to come out, with a chip on their shoulder, and we just didn't seem to really care. Anyway.
Yeah, it looked very. I mean, it's almost like kind of boring at this stage. Like the less said, the better. But it's just what's going on.
Well, that is the question, and the team's got another 2 weeks to think about it before we come up against the Bulldogs, and the rest of the season to try and figure out exactly what it is that we want to try and achieve. Whether we are going to make a strong push to try and scrape into finals, or if we've got an eye towards the future and what that might look like. So let's get some votes for hop on brewerytours.com.au. Book yourself a half or a full day tour right now with Matt and Joss, two of the greatest people known to man and woman alike, and they will take you to some of the best breweries across Brisbane and Gold Coast. All right, real life votes and podcast votes for me this week. You know how I like to operate. Real life, Warple, Sicily, and Gunston in no particular order, but probably that order. Podcast votes, I'm going to go Berry, Neil, McInerney, 3-2-1 there.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm really trying to something out here. I don't know where to begin.
I thought Berry, and I probably could have swapped Neil and Berry for the 3 and the 2, but I thought, he's putting together a really good season, driving up that contract price. And I thought once he got put to James Warple, Warple's influence was stymied a little bit. It was still there, but I thought by and large Berry had a good effect on that particular aspect. While getting a fair amount of the ball himself, he did have some Jared Berry moments where he would probably like to revisit those, but I thought by and large he was... he had a good game. Neil, we've already spoken about, and Oscar, we've touched on as well. I thought, he did a few more things this week that we know from Oscar. A few clunks out of the ruck and dumping it forward, which, as we've spoken about, people think is probably not the best method of inside 50s. But just to try and get us going a little bit, he tried a few different things that he wouldn't normally do, and I thought he had a good game.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'll go Berry 1, Loman 2, Neil 3.
Yeah.
Just because
Sure.
It's hard when there's distinct level of mediocrity swathing over everybody. So
yes, certainly. Yeah. Let's go do some changes now. Have a quick talk about the 2s before we launch into questions, because like I said, we've got a fair amount of them. The 2s played really, really well. Really well against a team that is on the cusp of the top 4 in the VFL and Box Hill. Smacked him by 68 points. Dev Robertson, clear best on ground, 32 touches, a goal, 6 tackles, 11 clearances. He had a fantastic game. Pryor played well. Jimmy Tunstall had a great game as well, 25 touches and 3 goals. As I said, Darcy Fort had a really, really good game. We had quite a tall lineup for the VFL. We had Henry Smith, Kalen Lane, and Darcy Fort all playing. I thought all 3 of them had pretty good games. Henry Smith putting together a really solid season in the 2s. The surprise packet, though, was Jared Lyons, and surprising in the way that he had a very different but equally impressive game. Playing a lot of the game, very little midfield time, basically played as a full forward of sorts. 22 touches and 4 goals, 3 to go with 8 tackles as well. So that's a pretty decent game from JL. What that matters for, I don't know. Probably nothing. We know he is generally the first cab off the rank when everyone's fit and healthy and all that sort of stuff. So he had a great game, it must be said.
Hold on. What did you just say?
when the team is settled, he's generally like the sub or the first in for last out sort of thing. That's what we're used to from Fags. Things have changed this year, and
yeah. I just because when he said fit and healthy, and this is the least fit and healthy I remember this list, and he is not the first cab off the rink now. So I just needed to hear that properly.
Yeah, and I guess if we had
to make sense of it,
if we had an injury to say Josh Dunkley, then he would be in that team, I suppose. But yeah, really impressive game from the twos. Like, really hard to find any faults with it at all. Yeah, so that's enough of that. So changes. Stas will probably come back in straight after the bye. Eric Hipwood will definitely come in as well. And then any sort of additional changes you may or may not want to make. So I guess the question is not just for this game up against the Bulldogs after the bye, but generally moving forward is, do you want to put your best, fittest, strongest team out there every week to try and compete and get wins? Or are you looking ahead to not necessarily 2025, but just, I guess, development for the younger teams, the younger players, and trying to get game time into them? So the way of thinking is you probably... Eric comes in for Brandon Ryan. Stas comes in for maybe Noah Answorth. Maybe he comes in for Harry Sharp, and Motti moves up the wing. And then, you know, I would probably have Dev Rob come in for, say, Bruce, who he hasn't done a whole lot wrong, but he's not really having a huge impact on games either, Bruce.
I think, there are elements of Bruce's game. His link-up play is good, but I think his defensive run's not quite where we would want it. You know, put it this way, he's got a lot of talent, but I feel like there are signs as to why he's not been picked up to play AFL football earlier on.
Yeah, and that's...
And I'm not trying to be hard on him. I'm just saying that can be the reality, you know?
No, and we all, like... every supporter loves Bruce. You know, his story, the way he's... You know, the things that he has done, but there's obvious deficiencies in his game. And so that's what I'm saying is, do you bring Dev in for Bruce to try and win games and try and produce a strong... Or do you give Bruce more game time to learn that sort of stuff in an AFL environment with an eye to the future? I guess that's where we're sort of at the crossroads here with the Brisbane Lions, knowing that we're probably not going to make finals, or if we do, not going to impact it a huge amount. So...
Yeah, it's funny because it's almost like I feel like you can kind of do both, because Dev Rob is kind of the eye to the future anyway. You know, he wouldn't be much older than Revel, I wouldn't think.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
But I definitely think that there are elements of, I think, some certain, let's say, linchpins that are different to the ones that people think possibly need to change. Like, if we're doing the people's votes, I'm being harsh on Rayner, and I'm dropping Zorko for that display, because it's like, don't do it. Don't do that. You should know better, and if you don't, there needs to be repercussion. And I understand that him doing that early on in his career, there wasn't even really ability to have repercussion because he was the best player on our team.
Yeah.
So, and for me, I'm probably going to take Archie out because he didn't impact very well, and that's fine. He had a quieter game the week before, and, you know, put Bailey up in the forward line, have Lohman play the link role, and you know, you've got a reasonably settled, reasonably consistent forward line there.
It was a bit of a weird one for Bales on the weekend, because he was quite often spotted across, you know, half back. He obviously went forward and kicked 2 goals in the game as well, but he didn't really seem to have a settled position across the weekend. It was sort of like, we want him in the team, but we're going to have to just slot him in wherever we can, depending on rotations.
And as we've discussed, that's not the way to get the best out of him.
Yeah. I mean, by and large, after having however many 4 or 5 weeks off, I thought he played reasonably well.
He was good, yeah. But it's not going to consistently get the best out of him, because we've seen that over the last, you know, 18 months, where it's like, where's he sitting? And, you know, he's a moments player, I feel.
Yes.
There's a less consistency that comes from him. But, you know, he does do some pretty wild things. You know, So I think for me, I'm looking at Archie, Ryan, Revel, and I mean, I've been riding Zorko all the time,
Yep.
and I just want more solidity than Zaz going forward, because I think Zaz can come from elsewhere.
Yeah.
I'd rather not potentially, if I was an opposing coach and Dan Zorko's in the team, I'm identifying him and I'm fire hosing him as a team, everything going through him, because he does we saw it when he made when a couple of things went against him, a couple of 50-meter penalty downfield. He then turned the ball over twice.
Yeah.
So he's clearly someone that I'm not going to say mental fragility, because that sounds a bit too strong. And I don't think that anyone playing AFL football kind of is mentally fragile. But like, there's an element of you can push that button, and I'd be going through him.
Yeah.
Particularly with him lining up in the half-back line. I also don't think that he's an eye to the future. So I think if we're being serious about trying to push, he might be in our best 22 at the moment. But I think that's the one for me. We've got a lot of half-backers that are not showing that they can do it at AFL level that possibly could, because there are plenty of AFL players that play shit for one team, move teams, they do a lot better. Like D'Ambrosio, so much better for Hawthorn than he was for Essendon. Like stuff like that. I don't know.
I think I understand exactly what you're saying. I still think we need that creativity off the back half for now. We can't just rely on McKenna for that. Motti has it in bits. Ryan Lester, yeah, he's a good accurate kick, but no more than 20 odd meters. I still think we need that creativity off the back half if we are to remain competitive. So I don't see him getting dropped, but I do understand everything you're saying as well. So, and knowing what we know about Fagan, I don't think he's going to pull that trigger. So I think he will still be putting out the strongest team available to him. Which, there's pros and cons to that, I suppose. If he genuinely still thinks that we are a chance to rattle cages in finals, then sure. Like, he keeps referring back to Carlton's position last year, and it's just sort of wearing a little bit thin at this point.
Well, it's because Carlton aren't super great team. Like, look at where they are now.
Yeah, look, things are going to have to change. People are still talking about, the coach and the coach's box and, changes that may or may not need to be made there. Obviously, David King had a big spiel about it on First Crack last night and what he thought. And, I'm probably not going to get into that today. But the TLDR of that was get Chris Scott, get rid of Fagan.
Oh, that is going to be super easy. Anyway.
That's what, and Anthony Hudson was just sitting there going, I don't it's obviously not going to happen. It just doesn't happen like that. You've got to pry Chris Scott out of Geelong somehow, and then, a whole bunch of stuff. But Kingy was
as much as I like the sound of my own voice, David King loves the sound of his own voice.
Oh yes.
So.
Oh yes. So, look, there will be some changes, of course. I can't imagine there will actually be any more than 2 or 3. But we'll see. We'll see in a fortnight time when we take on the Dogs.
I think there's like a rare opportunity in this point of the season to actually kind of look at certain structures and like, it's weird because I don't know whether we've had weapons from the half-back, but we've not ever really been a half-back scoring team in the same way that like Adelaide and Collingwood have been.
No.
We're more of that like front half turnover game with like our weapons from the back, like Coleman or like Daniel Rich historically, like kind of coming in to be an extra kind of in the midfield wall to then cause chaos kind of going forward. And it's almost like, do we need that? Or could we just be really solid and, not have to commit men from the back half to do that and just, rely on like the talented front half players and try and play them into a bit of form? Like there's a rare opportunity to try and look at that level of restructure. And maybe that is the kind of sort of really dull plan B, where it's like you're looking at it in almost like not like a Paul Roos or like a Ross Lyon type, everything is shit, but really knuckle down and be defensively accountable. And to me, that's the sort of thing where like someone like Starcevic is more important to the team than creativity going forward. And then you've got two modes. So you sit there and you go, if you're trying to hold a lead in the back of a quarter, then sorry, my alarm's going off. If you're trying to hold the back half together and hold a lead, you can go into that mode rather than having people there that maybe are not as defensively astute. Because maybe McKenna, maybe Coleman, maybe Zorko, they're not natural defenders as much as they are creative players.
Well, that's it.
Which isn't to say that they're not capable, but I think there are different ways. You don't necessarily have to look at it and go, well, we're gonna be dangerous from the back half with back half players. It doesn't always work that way. You can create space and create other things and try and maintain that. And maybe because this year there's been such little coaching and such just fucking putting people in and out all the time because people have been dying. There hasn't been that level of like looking at it and trying to find out where we can be solid. So we'll see. But anyway, what have you got for changes? We haven't really said them, so let's do changes.
All right, like definitive changes. Like I said, I think Fags will still at this stage. I think not that he's being stubborn, but I still think he genuinely believes we've got more to offer and that we'll be putting the strongest team out there. So for me, it's Ryan out. Hipwood comes in. I think I'm taking out Bruce and putting Dev in, just for a bit more experience. And the last one, Stars in for Sharp. Those are the three changes, yeah.
So would Starcevic be on your bench?
Yeah.
Or would you go Noah Answorth on the bench?
I think whoever starts on the bench will be one of Zorko, McKenna, or Motti.
Okay.
Because we've got two, like, you call it Noah and Stas as our sort of solid lockdown defenders.
Lockdown, yeah.
Whereas, McKenna's been left to guard a pretty dangerous small forward the last few weeks, and it's not his strong suit. Dylan Moore made him look stupid a few times, and he gets caught out. Leicester had a really good game on Blake Hardwick, so that was a plus. But yeah, I just think we do need that creativity, but when they're left to do too much defensively, the balance is wrong. So Stars comes in for Sharp, and then Motti plays a little bit of a hybrid wing, halfback.
Would you consider Hardwick a tall or medium? What would you consider him as a forward?
Medium, I suppose. Small, medium.
Because it's interesting, the flack that Fagan gets about the three tall forwards. You got Marby or Chol, Kolshadir, Jack Gunston, and Hardwick as four kind of medium. So it's not just him.
No,
it's not just him. Anyway, yeah, I think it's pretty good. I would, I want to do some fun ones. I want to take Rayner out. I want to take Cal Archie out and do a bit of reshuffle, take Zorko out. So I'm making how many changes am I making?
5 or 6.
Archie, Ryan, Rayner, Zorko, bringing in Hipwood, Starcevic, and Devrob, and then Sharpie onto the field and put someone as the bench.
Sure.
Zorko as the bench. Why not?
Why not?
Or Revel as the bench.
Yeah.
I might even have not taken him out. I don't know. I thought it a bit strange Revel was not the sub when he's kind of got that impactness to him.
Yeah.
Whereas I think Sharpie does a lot better when he plays a whole game. He was, bless his cotton socks, he was awful when he came on. One holding the ball and 2 turnovers, but you can't blame him really for that. Like, he just wasn't up to speed with the pace of the game. So,
and we all know he's got the tank to run out of games, so it was a bit of a strange one.
Yeah, it's like you take away the guy's biggest strength.
Yeah.
Whereas Revel's best strength is his kicking and his physicality. So
he took some decent overhead marks as well, Bruce. So he definitely had moments, but he definitely had moments as well. So yeah, you get what you get, I suppose.
I like him. I also want the corners back.
Yes.
He's got like a Stormy said he's got like a librarian's bun. So it's funny.
All right. For Crisp Communications, crispcoms.co, where you can get your free Brisbane Lions Fancast sticker. I had an update. I spoke to Abby from Crisp Communications. We've had over 40 people request Brisbane Lions Fancast stickers. So, if that's one of you, like, if you're one of those people, thanks so much for the support and ordering your sticker. You can get them for absolutely free at brisbanelionsfancast.com. Do your thanks to the guys at Crisp Communications. Let's get into some questions. We have got a few. I'll try and group as many as I can because a lot of them have a very similar flavour to them. So from Twitter, Roman McKinnon, Minchie and Ross, all within the same sort of bracket here. Roman says, when does it become an actual concern to the coaching about our accuracy in front of goal? Minchie, why is our kicking so inaccurate? Ross, goal kicking accuracy has dropped to 45%. The AFL average is 53%. This is excluding the win last week against the Tigers. Surely this is more a mental problem now that won't be fixed quickly. So why we bad in front of goal is the flavour there.
Because players don't have to put as much effort into it.
Sure.
That's the reason why.
Yeah.
I it's not a conspiracy that like the unionization of players means that they do less training hours. My brothers used to work. Goodness, I wish they worked. They used to play at Kenmore Bears, and we would see Lions players down there kicking for goal for hours in their own time. And I understand that this is their own time too, but this is on top of the pre sort of what the Players Association is. So going back to the late 90s, the early 2000s, kicking for goal for hours, left and right foot, everywhere, all around the ground. And it's like, I don't think they're doing that. And if they are, they're not doing it properly. And a lot can be said for practicing kicking for goal. I don't think just like doing a couple shots at the end of training is probably the right way to do it. I think surely there's got to be ways that you can work out drills where they're absolutely knackered going back for goal. And if they're missing, they're doing punishment, 20 lashes, do that sort of a thing. Create some stakes. I know that the stakes are not going to be the same because Charlie Cameron looks like a lost child going when he's like walking up to kick for goal. But like, they're obviously someone hasn't cracked the code of how to train this.
Yeah, I'm sure someone has, but yeah, it's just for whatever reason.
Probably Matthew Lloyd. Matthew Lloyd probably has.
Not happening for us. So
whatever Kai Lohman's doing is pretty good though, and whatever Logan Morris is doing is also pretty good.
Yeah, and maybe there's just like they haven't got the scars of years of AFL football entering their mind every time they line up for goal. They're just playing on instinct, and Kai especially seems like an instinct type player. Logan just is coming in as a natural footballer and producing and playing very, very well. So, yeah.
Well, Kai's an instinct player, but also his set shots are generally go straight.
Yeah.
Like they might not go through the goal every time, but they generally go straight. And that's not what we can say for particularly Cameron, Hipwood, and Danaher, where like they don't always go straight.
No.
When they go straight, they generally are goals. But when the thing is, the difference between a goal and you really shouldn't be kicking the ball out on the fucking full from a set shot. Like I would probably do that occasionally, but not every time. What the hell am I? I've got half a leg.
All right, let's get into, I guess, the question of the week. And with Eric Hipwood being out, people have turned their attention to someone else, and I guess you have as well. So I'm going to rifle through a few of these. Scott Rayner, in career worst form, is a protected species, just crashes packs and never comes down with it. Then no follow-up or pressure. Whatever he and Charlie and Hippie did in the USA has left them all very flat. Rod, how can we get more out of Rayner? Delvis, Rayner? Question mark, question mark, question mark. JC, what the hell is going on with Cam Rayner? Live, is Rayner the worst number one draft pick of all time? He doesn't even seem to even try to get involved. And then summarised here by Derek, who got in touch via our speak pipe. So thank you very much for that, Derek. We're always keen to get people involved here. And this is what Dingo Derek has to say.
Good evening, gentlemen. Dingo Derek from Brisbane. My question is this. Is Cameron Rayner a luxury that we can no longer afford?
Is he a luxury we can no longer afford? So the flavour of the week is, what the hell is going on with Cam Rayner? Now, here's my thoughts on it, and that is Cam Rayner doesn't... And we spoke about this last year with Bailey and McCluggage. Rayner doesn't seem to have a specific role this year. It's, yeah, we want him more in the midfield, but we like him up forward as well. Darcy Garner coming in, and now Logan Morris taking that third tall option. He hasn't got that defined role this year, whether it is midfield or up forward. He just seems a bit lost, just sort of like a boat floating out on the ocean with no real direction. He's just there.
Daniel Rich's party yacht.
We know we want him there, and we know what he's capable of, but he's not producing it, and he hasn't got a defined role, and that's where I guess we're not getting the best out of him. So when someone asks how do we get more out of him, my answer is give him a defined role, and give him that role for a 4 to 6 week block.
Yeah, I think you're pretty bang on. Like, I'm a bit ticked off with him, to be honest.
Yeah, sure. Like, and you're not alone there. You're certainly, like, clearly you're not alone there after all the things I've just read out. But he's a decent player. Is he the worst number one pick of all time? No, probably a bit dramatic there. There's, famously more flops, but he's certainly not the best one in the last 10 years either. There's certainly players that have gone past him, and I can't remember that draft year specifically, who was 2, 3, 4, and 5. It was the same year we picked up Starcevic and Bailey as well. So you would argue that it was a pretty good draft for us all in all, picking up those 3 in the first 20 or 30 picks. So, yeah, but he has been disappointing, albeit from, a quarter against Melbourne, a few little moments against GWS as well, I think he pulled out. But, yeah, it's been a slow start to 2024 for Cam.
Yeah, I think that's a good pickup on the lack of defined roles.
Because he's not exactly getting huge amounts of CBAs either, or spending a lot of time in the forward line. He's attending stoppages when it is up forward, but
oh man, the top 5 are so good. In that
of course
year.
they are.
It's Rayner, Andrew Brayshaw, then 4's Davey Zuniak, and 5's Chera.
I would probably... I'd probably still have Cam Rayner
I
over
left Paddy
Chera.
Dow out because Paddy Dow was number 3, so he can get in the bin.
Yeah, I'd have Rayner over Chera. The rest are definitely arguable. But I think
if we didn't have Dunkley, Chera would be invaluable in that context. But sure. I think Dunkley's a better version of Chera. But
I would definitely have LDU. But I think anyone that had pick 1 that year would have taken Cam Rayner. He was he was touted as the number 1 pick that whole year, and anyone that ended up with pick 1 would have taken him. So that is the nature of the draft. It is a gamble.
Yeah, I think he's unfortunately fallen afoul of just like there being some absolutely bonkers players like after that in terms of ready-made players that have come in. Look at Walsh, look at Rowell, look at Harley Reid, guys that have just come in and hit the ground running. And it's like, it's kind of created a weird false economy for the past.
Yeah.
Because, the year after that was Sam Walsh, Matt Rowell, as terms of number 1. Then you got Jamara, and he's fine, and Horn Francis. So there's like all of these like ready-made players that have come in and just like killed it immediately. So it's kind of like rough company, but yeah, I don't know. It does a lot when he himself is kind of projecting an image and has done so as like this really likable, like happy-go-lucky scamp.
Yep.
And I think that goes a long way for making people like you. But when you end up like cheating on your missus, that kind of goes away. You kind of lose those points. So, if it's the sort of thing, like if it's a mate of yours, you're just like, what a dickhead. What are you doing? Yeah. So that's kind of a little bit of an element how I feel, where there's like, you don't have any goodwill points. And that's where when your footy struggles, you don't have that like, he's good for the team, because he's clearly fucking not.
Well, I don't like. He's one of the ones that I don't see getting dropped, and I guess he fits into the And it's a question that a lot of people ask James Barron this week. Why do so many players get a pass week in, week out? And I guess Rayner falls into that one. For a long time it was Jared Berry, Eric Hipwood. You can throw a dart at the board and probably find a player that, well, how come this guy's getting a game each and every week?
I think the one you kind of hit the nail on the head before in terms of he doesn't have a defined position at the moment, which means that he's probably not as structurally culpable, which I do think means he's getting a pass for no good reason.
Yep.
Whereas you can look at the team on the whole and go, well, we saw against Adelaide we were getting kind of tailed up from the back half, and that's kind of indicative of a bit of a disconnect and new players and stuff coming in. And that's probably why players have been getting a pass in certain elements. Like, you can look at last year and go, maybe there were times when players were getting a pass, but we made a grand final, so who gives a shit? This year, there's definitely more case for argument for that. But when you've got players dropping like flies, you can't just drop everybody as well, because otherwise there's no familiar faces, there's no cohesion, there's none of that sort of a thing. So I think, I agree with you in the sense that give him a role, but also if he doesn't have a defined role, why can't someone else try it if he's not actually adding to the structured element of like the kind of non-negotiables? He's not a key forward. He's not a ruckman. He's not an on-baller. He's not your first possession guy because you've made it clear that he's not. Would you have imagined like Jared Berry going to more centre bounces than him, given all of the fanfare about his on-the-ball work for the past 2 years or since before he did his ACL? Like, it's unfathomable.
Yeah.
And I like Jared Berry at the centre bounces.
We all do.
But I'd also probably like Rayner in there too. But he's not in there. And when he's in there, he doesn't do anything. Well, other than that one quarter against Melbourne. So,
well, that's it. And he's not... Even then, I don't think that was his centre bounce work that made the difference there. It was that sort of stoppage work in the front half that he really had the effect. So he wasn't in CBAs. But
yeah, true.
He's fallen behind Bez now as well. And I like you, I like Bez in the middle. We're getting the best out of Bez, and it's the sort of thing people have been saying for weeks leading up to that as well. It's like, we all know he plays his best footy as an inside mid. Why isn't that happening? Now it's happening. We're seeing him play his best footy. He'd be top 5 in our BNF at the moment, I would imagine. Jared Berry's put together, 6 or 7 really, really solid weeks of footy. Career best footy. So, yeah. All right. Here's another group of questions. Nathan, Ross, and Neil. How much did we miss Hipwood today? By Brandon Ryan's 1 goal, he looked so far off it. Ross, people might bag Eric Hipwood, but we missed him as there was so much attention on Joe, and he would have kept Sicily busy. Neil, do we actually miss Eric Hipwood more than we would have thought? He hasn't been top scorer this year, although his disruptive influence to opposing defences can be an asset. So suddenly people are getting it with Eric Hipwood when you see what life looks like without him. And yeah, 1 game is probably not a massive sample size, but it is enough to see a little bit of what we missed from Eric. His work up the ground, his defensive intent. And, it must be said, he got suspended for a defensive tackle, a really good tackle that he got a free kick and a goal from. So we didn't get that from Brandon Ryan, did we? But,
we got one. I don't remember it, but
people are pointing to, the fact that he may have kept Sicily busy. He does. He keeps a key defender busy. So I know he'll come back into the team and he'll probably have a couple of weeks of poor scoreboard impact and people will want him dropped again. But I think people need to remember this and remember yesterday's game and think that, he's not kicking bags of goals, but he does provide something for our team that we need.
Yeah, I think there's also an element that because all 3 of them are kind of in bad form, and I lump Charlie Cameron in with Danaher and Hipwood.
Yeah.
Is it like traditionally there would always be potential to, if 2 of the 3 of them were playing terribly, the other one would crop up. But when they're all doing it, it's sort of there's no like relationship for that. There's no give and take. It's all just like no one's given anything. So it's a little bit unfortunate because I don't think it's not by design. They're just not playing well. But yeah, I mean, I have been like, I don't have a problem with Hipwood.
No, neither do I.
And I haven't. Even going back to the Western Bulldogs game, which was sort of the first time. It was weird back then because I think that was kind of Hipwood and Dano hadn't played a lot of footy together. They'd played a bit, but Hipwood had done his ACL, and then Joe missed a couple of games with his shoulder and stuff like that. So there was a bit of, they weren't quite there. And Dan McStay was a big cog in the season before. So when the Bulldogs game happened, Hipwood was doing a lot of the gut running and that sort of stuff. And he does do a lot of that. And Joe's certainly improved in terms of like he's having to go into the ruck and affect in other areas and stuff. And it's hard to fault Joe sometimes. Sometimes his effort isn't there, but also, it's hard to see what actual effort is outside of what's on the screen in front of you.
Yeah.
So,
no, I agree, and I think Eric coming back in the team will immediately improve our system. So, I'd like to say hopefully that's the last we hear about, drop Hipwood, but it certainly won't be. Just like the Sack Fagan conversation will keep propping up as well. So, a couple here in a similar vein as well. Jensen, individual growth has dried up. I'm paraphrasing here. He had a lot to say here. Individual growth has dried up. The last improved player we had was Kadeen Coleman. Zig, a little bit level-headed here. I'm past the point of disappointment. I think I'm ready to be back in 2016. Take a win when it comes and look forward to the future in the young guns. 6 players under 25 games. Who was your best at the new kids? So,
I'm actually wondering what team he was watching in 2016 because that team was awful.
Yeah.
I think he might have made a slight slip of the tongue and he might have meant 2017 or 2018.
Maybe.
So I'll give him a pass for that, but still.
So I guess similar thoughts, but also pretty opposing there as well. So Jensen's a little bit more glass half empty. Like individual growth has dried up, and the last improved player we had was Kadeen Coleman. Zig, we've got 6 players under 25 games on the weekend. Who was the best of the new kids? So I suppose you can put a couple of players into the kids category. Bruce, Shadow, Sharpie, probably there as well. Logan, Kai.
Yeah, I mean, responding to Jensen Button, I'd say Jasper Fletcher is still improving. Darcy Wilmot's still improving. You can't look at the form and improvement is not a straight line.
Yeah,
it's not. That's not how it works. And I think Jasper Fletcher does a lot of stuff defensively, and he works a lot on that. He's always his effort is infallible. He might not make scoreboard impact, but then when he gets his opportunity to do it, he does. So fine, he's improved to me. Kadeen Coleman for a long time was pretty nothing. He was playing as a small forward, and then he kind of found his home down back, almost by design, by accident, and then it just ended up being transformative. Particularly at that horror show game against Richmond at the MCG a few years ago, where that was his kind of breakout moment.
And obviously his final series last year as well, which was just
of course. Well, I mean, the final series was his breakout for anyone that doesn't watch the Lions, but the Tigers game was his breakout for anyone that does. So I'd argue that Wilmot, Fletcher, but you could probably say that all these guys were good when they started. So is it a coaching thing, or is it just a talent thing, or is it a sticking with them? So, Ryan Lester's improved significantly. So there's one.
Of the kids that have come in over the last month or so, I'm probably most taken by Logan Morris, and Kai's obviously been very impressive as well. But Logan Morris, in his 3 or 4 games now, he just seems to be a natural footballer. Good eye for the goals, can kick well, present well, take marks on the lead. His follow-up of groundwork has been good as well. Really impressed with him so far, and hope that he stays in the team for the next little bit until something has to happen or whatnot. But he's been really, really good, Logan.
Yeah, Kai as well.
Yep.
I know you mentioned it, but he gets more of the ball than you'd think.
Oh yeah,
it's amazing for a small forward to be getting nearly 20 touches in his last couple of games at a high efficiency with a lot of tackles and a lot of tackles in the forward 50. So, or relatively speaking, good overhead. He's kind of that prototype for a small player. So it's the sort of thing where you look at it and go, in the next few years, who are players that are potentially going to be not playing anymore? And you're like, Blake McCarthy, possibly Charlie Cameron, because they're in their 30s now. And you go, all right, well, life without them would have seemed impossible, and now that's not kind of the case. So
I mean, I think Charlie's still got a few. He's only 29. I think he's got a few years left.
Yeah.
But yeah, I understand long term. Link's probably the most likely of those two anyway to depart. But yeah, those two definitely standing out, and they're impacting the scoreboard, which is a very tangible thing that people can grab onto and be like, yes, good. All right. Who has had the biggest drop? This is from Brad. Who's had the biggest drop off since 2023? He names Rayner, Zach Bailey, Charlie Cameron. You can probably throw Hipwood in there. How many contests do Joe and Eric Hipwood get hands to without actually taking a mark like tall forwards should? And how many players thought they could walk straight back into a grand final? So there's a few questions rolled into one there. It's all, that last one is a bit more of an all-encompassing question of attitude, and I do get that at the point. I remember across the off-season, just, you know me, I'm a full footy enough. I can't get enough of footy. I print out the fixture. I have it on my wall at work, and, I try and watch as much footy as I can each and every weekend, but it took me a lot of motivation to get excited for this year. Coming down from the grand final last year just wasn't the same. And I remember thinking to myself, I wonder if the players are feeling anything like this as well, because if they are, that's a worrying sign. But I did chalk it up to, well, they're professional athletes, I'm just a guy, so who cares? But maybe there's something to be said there to backing up, and, they're probably just all impatient to get back there again without having to wanting to put in the hard work of a season of home and away football. But you've got to, because there are other teams that haven't had the taste of a grand final that are still hungry for it, and maybe we've just lost that.
We just have to wait for them to fall.
Cool. What a great...
Yeah, so in terms of drop-off, I mean, Charlie Cameron, obviously, Cam Rayner, obviously. I mean, I think Zach Bailey's a bit harsh because he's missed like 5 games.
Yeah.
So, whatever.
Neil's dropped off.
The forwards, Neil's like just about everyone has sort of more or less dropped off. McKenna, I think, has dropped off.
Yeah.
Although he's also struggled with injuries, so make of that what you will. Starcevich's hair has dropped off.
I mean,
so there's a lot of it.
We've said it a few times on this show that there's very few players that have maintained or improved, and largely the team has fallen away. Some by a lot, some by not so much, but largely it is definitely, a downgrade on output.
It's a regression, or it's almost like a deep breath, almost like we just sort of, But so, and as far as people that thought they would walk into a grand final, I'd say probably not them, but it feels like it.
Yeah, well, I mean, from the outside looking in, most people, media and punters alike had, Brisbane as premiership favourites, if not making prelims and being right up there again. I don't think anyone sort of said...
Which we should have been, for sure. And I think at the start of the season we should have been, but where we are now, like if this was our team at the start of the year, no one's saying that.
Yeah.
Like, if our starting lineup that we played with on the weekend is the one that we went into round 1 with, people aren't saying... They would say we would be around the 8. Now, I was obviously a bit bloody... got ahead of myself last week, didn't I?
Yeah. Well, that's fine.
Just trying to inject a little optimism,
Yeah. It's a little bit harder this week, I must say.
A week's a long time, because I think between the week before and the week before that, it was sort of like, oh, okay, cool. And now it's like, the teams that were a bit on the cusp, that I was like, they're only a win and a half away, they're now 2.5 wins away. And you're like, shit.
It happens quick. It happens very, very quick. All right, one more for you. Miller's just said, why do we never play the Hawks at the Gabba? And that's just one of those cool fixture anomalies that just doesn't work for us. We always... And why do we suck against Hawthorn? Can't put my finger on that, but certainly not playing at the Gabba doesn't help. All right, last one's from Mike and George, sort of in a little clump here. Mike say... our inside 50 methodology, long bombs to contest is poor efficiency. We do this far too often. It's now predictable and easy to defend. George, echoes that a little bit. He's also thrown in the hunger and will to compete as a bit of a problem, and our lack of connectivity and forward 50 efficiency, as he's pointing at some potential problems for us as well.
Yeah, there were some worrying signs, particularly where I think we might have scored a couple of goals from some really, really dank entries.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, that is not the reward for effort you need. Because, you don't want to be... everyone says it. You don't want to be, like, smashing balls in from, like, the 80-meter mark. Because they're just going to be, like, low percentage shots. And there's just sort of a lack of willingness to kind of try and run and break that last line to then provide a deep entry. So, I still am firmly of the belief that it's like we do have a plan B. It's just everyone thinks that our plan B is plan A.
Yeah.
Our plan A is just the one that gets shut down, which leads to the long bombing shit. And you can see it because we're trying to move the ball through the corridor. That's what we try to do. If you want to watch a team that actually does plan B to varying effects, it's like Carlton do our plan B, which is bombing it long down the line. They just have two guys that clunk marks sometimes, a bit. So I would hate to have that as a plan A, personally.
Yep. Scoring
from stoppages and scoring from long down the line. Like, I'm still a firm believer that I think that without a turnover game, you're not going to win the flag.
Yep.
So, and I think I don't think Carlton, until they get that turnover game, they're not going to win the flag. So it's hard because you're trying to really like form this cube together, and we've got elements of it, but it's sort of like, it's funny because the lack of contested marks that Hipwood and Danaher don't take, if they did, we'd be more likely to kick it down the line anyway. So it's like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
If they could take a contested mark, we'd be more liable to do a bailout kick. So it's kind of funny.
Well, it's sort of...
Maybe it would be good. Maybe it would be good because then people would mark them and be less likely to flood the corridor.
You never know. I mean, it's very reminiscent of early 2000s where the game plan was bomb it to Brownie and go from there. And that sort of, once Brownie retired, we were left with that old game style of bomb it to Brownie, and he wasn't there to mark it. So, yeah, it is one of those things. Yeah, Eric and Joe, you can talk about them all day and all night and where they have deficiencies, but they're the key forwards we've got. They've got their pros, they've got their cons. And I mean, yeah, you can, like I said, you can talk about it forever. At the end of the day, they're what we've got, and we've got to make use of them accordingly. I do agree with our inside 50 method has been worked out, and this happened last year when we had however many games where we scored 100 points in a row for like 6-7 weeks. We came up against Essendon up here at the Gabba, and they threw an extra behind the ball to disrupt our forward 50 entries, and they did it, much better. They had Andrew McGrath play on Charlie Cameron as well, did a fantastic job on him, and they really... we still got away with the win, but that sort of let everyone else know, hey, this is where they're vulnerable, and now everyone's caught up to speed with it and knows how and where they can get us. So everyone is caught up, so we've tried a little bit more dangerous ball movement. There's a little bit more kick mark stuff coming into our game over the last month or so. But yeah, we're still not quite there. We are still heavily relying on get it forward to the tall forwards, bring it to ground, let the smalls do their work. It's worked for us for a long time, and it's a hard habit to get out of, but we do need a few more options, I think, especially when those forwards we're talking about are well down on 2023 form.
Indeed.
All right, well, that is it for questions, and that is been a fair amount of chat about the Lions across the weekend and across 2024 as a whole, I suppose. We might come back next week with a small lead-up episode to the Dogs game across the bye. We also might not, so that's a discussion for off-air. But
I think we will, because I've got some things that I want to talk about in a comparative sense that I think I might leave till next week.
Sure.
Because I think it could be a fun, not a deep dive, but like the shallow end of the pool dive.
Cool.
A wuss dive.
Well,
Something like that.
if there's one thing I've learned, it's never dive into the shallow end of a pool. So we'll
Did
see.
you did you chip your teeth or something as a kid?
No, I just think it's one of those things that you're told never to do.
I do want to end on a slightly funny segment.
Sure.
We didn't obviously get the sponsor, but I promised I'd talk about Jack Gunston.
Oh, that's right.
I was going to do two, but I'll save one to next week. Do we think that Jack Gunston was the ultimate planned plant by Vic Bias? Now, I want to make this really clear that I am taking the piss.
Good.
Because sometimes people might not get that, but I'm really caveating that with this, which kind of ruins the illusion. But anyway, if you consider everything that happened with Jack Gunston joining the Lions, if you spell them out all one after the other, it reads like the ultimate con.
Maybe.
What are your thoughts?
Some sort
What are your
of
thoughts?
sleeper agent to gather intel and bring back to Hawthorn.
So, who's to say they didn't plant the seeds to take Dan McStay out of the Lions and bring Jack Gunston in? So, taking out someone that was probably quite a bit more valuable. Did he actually want to go home? Maybe. Who knows? Jack Gunston comes in, immediately takes away development positions from younger players potentially. You know, maybe we could be seeing a different forward line. The touted only 2 talls.
Yeah.
He comes in, doesn't do a great deal for a long time, and stifles the team development and the strategy. What are they doing? They always go back to the 3 talls. He occasionally has a good game to keep him in the cycle. And then, when it comes down to it, he convinces one of the Lions' favourite sons to drop himself and ultimately retire in Daniel Rich, ending a much-loved career. He then, at the end of the season, after not playing in the grand final or impacting at all, leaves, gives us sticks, and then plays the best game he's played in 5 years against us. What an amazing thing by Vic Bias in order to stifle us and try and ruin our premiership window. Maybe he also was when certain players, I know ACLs aren't based on calcium, but why not? For the sake of it, let's go with it. When they were asking for full cream milk, he was giving them oat milk in their coffees to weaken the bones of the players and provide all the ACLs. So, thank you, Jack Gunston.
It's a hell of a theory you've got there, Patrick.
Would you believe me if I told you I just came up with it on the spot just then?
I would, yeah. Yes, I would.
Yeah, good. Very good.
Well, that seems like a good enough place to end things for this week. You can take that theory home with you, chew it, and see what you come up with, because there's a bit of everything there. But next week we'll be back with a bit of a stock take. I'll give you an update on our votes leaderboard as well, so that's something to maybe look forward to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And
If you upload any of that, can you please make sure you put a gigantic flashing light saying satirical over the top of it?
I think people will.
We don't need any more 1-star reviews about negative takes or hot takes, because hot takes are fun, particularly when they're completely baseless. Just before we go, another thing to make us smile: how good was that draw? Loved it.
Oh,
Had
yeah.
the song ready and everything to go.
Lovely.
Played it as the siren went. It was brilliant.
Yeah, that was good. And how good is Lloyd Johnson pulling out a backflip as well?
I didn't see that.
I mean, it's easily findable on the interwebs. But just imagine man doing backflip. Yay.